So good morning. I see a lot of familiar faces, but for those who don't know me, I am Meg Pritchard. I am the political director of Represent PA. So what that basically means is I run the process with our great endorsement committee and executive committee and executive director of determining the endorsements and the funding for our fantastic candidates for State House and State Senate. And it may seem at first glance that this breakfast briefing is a little off topic because we don't invest in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court races or in any judicial races. But it is not, in fact, off topic because it is Pennsylvania elections, very important Pennsylvania elections, and the work of the state courts, in particular, our Pennsylvania Supreme Court, has a very big impact on what goes on in Harrisburg and what goes on across the state and vice versa, actually. So I am pleased to welcome Debbie Gross. She is, we have had her previously. Tiffany, can you just pull up the next slide for me? That would be awesome. And she is going to be speaking today on the Pennsylvania judicial races. And I am going to give my brief spiel before I introduce her. I happen to be a huge both infographic fan and legal nerd. I do have a law degree. And so I had to find some fantastic infographic to show everybody this morning. And this is actually what the Pennsylvania court system looks like in brilliant color. And today we will be talking, for the most part, about our Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which sits at the top of that pyramid there. I don't expect anyone to digest this, but I would be more than happy to send this to anyone who is a legal nerd as well and who wants to digest this with me. Tiffany, can you just go on to the next? Thank you. So our Pennsylvania Supreme Court is what, and Debbie, I know we'll get into this later, I think, is what we call a court of discretionary jurisdiction. So it has, while it is an appellate court, so it does hear appeals from the lower courts, the justices have the choice to choose or not choose to hear particular cases that come before it, with some notable exceptions, death penalty cases being one. And what that means for that particular court is that it plays a very outsized role in some very important issues, including issues that we all care about and that we know are central to people in Pennsylvania. Abortion, for one, school funding, public education, voting and voting rights. A big topic lately, which has been, of course, districting, redistricting, gerrymandering. So that court interprets the Pennsylvania laws, the Constitution. It also has a hand in the three branches of government. Somebody help me. Checks and balances. Thank you. It's very early. On the checks and balances system with the Pennsylvania executive branch, so the governor, and also the legislature. So that means that our justices play an outsized role in those decisions as well. There are 7 justices on the Supreme Court. At the moment, we have 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans. Why should we care about that? Well, Debbie will tell us more about that, but certainly that plays a role in how these justices see the cases that come before it. And this year we have 3 justices, the 3 that you see before you, Christine Donohue, Kevin, I think it's Dougherty, and David Wecht. They are up for what's called retention, which is the way that justices remain on the court after they've been elected the first time around. And again, why should we care about this? Well, Debbie will, I think, talk about this as well. At this point, the elections for justices have become quite politicized. And I think we have been seeing and hearing across our phone screens and our laptops pleas for funding for these justices to keep them on the court because there is an outsized attempt by Republicans to remove them. These are 3 of the 5 Democratic justices. So I am not going to try to talk about the ins and outs of this because we have an expert instead, but I am just teeing that up for her. And Tiffany, if you can flip to the next slide, that would be great. And I will introduce Debbie Gross, who is joining us from Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. The link is there if anyone wants to check out the website. Some great resources. I was looking at all sorts of them this weekend in preparation for this. She is the president and CEO of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, and she has taken that leadership role after many, many other leadership roles. 35 years of private legal practice, complex commercial litigation. She served as chancellor of the Philadelphia Bar in 2017. Debbie, at some point, I'd love to hear more about the work that you did on behalf of the bar, but I do know that her work was focused on the legal nonprofit community. So those organizations that people and entities go to for help on a pro bono or reduced basis, among other things. She served as the Bar Association president of the Bar Association Foundation for several years and as a trustee for more than 15. So she has a very deep legal background in courts and the court systems, and now she dedicates her time to Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. And I am going to let her speak on this important topic. So, Tiffany, if you would I'll turn it
Yep,
over
you're
to you,
good.
Debbie.
Thank
Okay.
you so very much, Meg. That was really wonderful. So thank you very much. I love this organization. I don't know if you know it or not, but I'm friends with Chris. So it's great to see this organization's thriving and doing so well. So I first am going to give a disclaimer, right? I am a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. I'm a 501c3. I can't tell you how to vote. I can tell you where to go to learn about how to vote and who makes recommendations. But I personally am not going to tell you how to vote other than you need to get out and vote. This is a judicial election year. And I know you want me to focus on the Supreme Court, but all judicial elections are important. 20% of registered voters come to vote in odd numbered years. That means that the minority, okay, is voting and making decisions for the majority. That's not good. That's not our country. So, and a lot of studies show people don't want to vote for judges. We don't know who they are. They don't go out and campaign or tell that much information. I put that in quotes because I'll explain that. Or, it's not important to me. It is important. It's really important. And and I like to say this because every position for judge is important because typically they move their way up the ladder first. So most important, right? We look at the Court of Common Pleas judges, and then they sometimes become intermediate appellate court judges. Those are our Commonwealth and Superior Court, and I'm going to briefly explain what they do. And then but Meg did a great job. And then the Commonwealth and Superior Court judges typically make their way up to the Supreme Court. So all judges are important and we need to inform ourselves about them. The other thing, and I'm diverting, but then I'll go back to my spiel, is that the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, while yes, extremely important, isn't always the final arbiter, I like to say, of the law in Pennsylvania, because some cases they don't take up, some cases aren't appealed, right? It's not up to the Supreme Court what cases come before them. It's up to the lawyers to determine whether a matter is appeal. So, for example, and I know you've had her speak, but Deborah Gordon-Clare was on here about her famous, wonderful, amazing Education Law Center case about how we fund education in Pennsylvania. That was decided by the Commonwealth Court. There was a trial in front of the Commonwealth Court, a lengthy trial, lengthy case. Court made a great decision. never appealed. So that is the law of the land in Pennsylvania. So, and we have retention elections, right, for every court. So I'm going to take a step back. Judges are elected for 10 years. Time, um, the initial requirement for uh, all judges, I'm going to say all levels from Court of Common Pleas up. There, I don't, and everybody here is from different counties. So there's different rules for different counties in Pennsylvania. Philadelphia County has a municipal court that's an entry-level court. And in Philadelphia, all judges have to be lawyers. Outside of Philadelphia, in every other county, the entry level position is magisterial district judges. They don't have to be lawyers. They just have to take a class and pass a test. So research and information is really important. Okay. All right. Yes, we have retention elections. I'm gonna go backwards. The retention elections, the purpose, first we had this initial, right? You elect a judge for 10 years. It's an initial term, and it's political. Yes, there is an R&D. Actually, interestingly enough, for the lower court judicial elections, you can run, so Court of Common Pleas, you can run on both the Republican and the Democratic ticket. That is not uncommon. So the reason being, it isn't beneficial to anyone for a judge to be a politician, right? Judges are supposed to be independent. They're supposed to make up their they're supposed to make their decisions, I'm going to say their rulings based not on their political party, but on how they interpret the law, the Constitution, the statutes. So in Court of Common Pleas, you can run on, both party ballots, and you could also be an independent or a liberal candidate, or it's just in Pennsylvania, as you all know, it's a little more of an uphill battle. Okay, so but once we get to the intermediate appellate courts, yes, there is an R or a D in front of that candidate, and on the ballot. After the initial 10-year term, the sole question is, should this judge be retained? There is no political party involved. This was the intent in 1968 in the Constitutional Convention. This was sort of the compromise. I will tell you, PMC was created to get judges appointed, selected based on merit. Never happened. We were close in 1967, 68, I'm told. Just didn't happen. But this was the compromise. I haven't given up on it, so everybody knows. I'll come talk about it another time. But we're working on that on a different approach. But we're still moving forward with it. So the goal was that judges would be determined that a judge should continue for another 10-year term, yes or no, based on their performance. But, how is that performance judged, right? So we now have much more thorough methods, I'm going to say, of judging a judge's performance based on internet. But we'll get into that. But this was simply a yes or no question, no politics involved. It has become very, very political, which is unfortunate. And the reason I'm going to say this is because our court is a really phenomenal court right now. We have as Meg said, we have 7 justices. They all get along. They work well. They play well in the sandbox. I don't know if anybody out there can remember, but 10 years ago, when these justices were first elected, our justices of the Supreme Court did not play well in the sandbox. There was Porngate. There was allegations of discrimination. It just was a really not good situation in Pennsylvania, and you wouldn't want to hold up your Supreme Court as a beacon. I will tell you now, I really do think, while we have, a range of justices from different parties, I still think we have a beacon on our Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They get along, they enjoy being with each other, and they don't follow that party line in all their decisions. So I think that's important for you to understand that. PMC and with Committee of 70 and League of Women Voters and a number of other organizations held a Supreme Court retention justice fireside chat. That's quite a mouthful. On September 8th. It was at Central High. It is recorded. It is on PMC's website, www.pmconline.org. I really urge you to go watch it. It was phenomenal. It surpassed my expectations. And you really get to know the judges because you want to get to know them, right? You want to know that they are human beings, that they're compassionate, they have but yet they may have to rule, right? Make decisions against their own personal beliefs. But they repeatedly say that and they acknowledge it, which is also very important. So I commend you to look at our website for that. Yes, I have a slideshow, but I'm not gonna go through all of it because I just feel like it's better for me to talk. But there's also tomorrow, the 30th, an appellate court candidate forum with the appellate court candidates for Commonwealth and Superior Court. It's at 7:30. You could register on the League of Women Voters website, probably on I know on my website as well. Then on October 14th, there is a fireside chat with the retention judges for appellate court, for Superior Court and Commonwealth Court. Sorry, there's a lot of information here, but it's really important for you to inform yourselves, right? I mean, I could easily tell you how to vote, but I won't. But you need to spread the word and send out the information. So it's definitely urgent for you to do that too, because people don't. I just had a conversation this weekend with somebody who I consider pretty sophisticated in politics and yet knew nothing about the judicial elections and retention elections. And so the other important thing, and before I go into my spiel, is the retention election questions are on the back of the ballot. If you have a paper ballot, please make sure you tell people to turn the ballot over. You know, the first part will have the judicial candidates for the initial, 10-year term. Turn the ballot over. It will have the retention election questions because they are questions, remember. And so there are five appellate court questions about whether these candidates should be retained. Okay, let me share my video, which is, hold on a minute. Sorry, I should have done this. There it is. Okay. And I can want to start. Where's my start from the you can see my screen, right?
Yep. We
Okay,
see it in yeah, there you go.
Slideshow. Okay. So the other thing is I can share this PowerPoint with you. So you just tell me how to send it to you and I will do that. I've also been interviewed by C70. We do a lot of work with C70 about the retention elections, but there's a lot of information about there. I'm going to blind you, but I'm going to go through some of these really fast just because Meg already hit it up, and I'm not even going to go through the court system. What I am going to talk about is a little bit about the intermediate court, just because I really do feel they deserve your understanding. How's that? So Commonwealth Court, it's an intermediate appellate court. We talked about it. It is the court that decided that education funding in Pennsylvania was unconstitutional. I can't emphasize enough how important that case is to Pennsylvania. Of course, legislators are still working it out. I'd like to say, this is a balance of our three branches of government, but whatever. There's 9 judges who sit on this court. Again, it's really unique to Pennsylvania. We're the only state in the country that has a Commonwealth court that handles cases brought by and against state and government and regulatory agencies. It does have it has that trial court aspect, which is so therefore it's not just an appellate, but it's also trial court, but it doesn't have a jury. Decisions are made by a judge. Okay, so again, there's one seat open in this court for for election, and then there is one retention position. Again, um, Superior Court, 15 judges sit on this court. And this court, too, can be a final arbiter of disputes. It is one of the busiest courts in the country. As Meg had talked about the Supreme Court being a court of discretion, this court has no discretion, I like to say. Um, every case can be appealed to the Superior Court. They may not issue a decision. They may just say that this is an issue that's been decided before, or there's not an issue that they want to address, that they need to address. It's abbreviated, but they also could decide that that this is a matter that is important. And again, if the parties don't appeal a decision from the Superior Court, this is the final law of the land in Pennsylvania. So again, really important. One open seat. I'm going to go to the Bar Association ratings shortly, but I will provide this PowerPoint to you all so you can distribute it how you want. And then one retention position. Okay. Supreme Court, again, 7 justices sitting on this court. We've talked about it. It has the ultimate authority on many matters. But what also you need to know is that the Supreme Court doesn't only hear cases. It has a lot of other supervisory activities that really are important to running the judiciary in Pennsylvania. So it has this administrative office of Pennsylvania courts. It runs our judicial conduct board. It licenses attorneys. It regulates the practice of law. It has various special committees of the Supreme Court. So this is part of the breadth, I'm going to say, of the scope of the Supreme Court. And just sort of briefly, which I'll go into a little more, but like each justice takes a project that they are interested in. So our Chief Justice of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is Deborah Todd. Her focus has always been and continues to be on seniors. Justice Christine Donohue, her focus has been on young lawyers, helping them get expertise and experience. Justice Dougherty, his focus has been on autism and mental health. He has held a number of mental health conferences, making sure that the judges understand how to handle individuals in court with mental health issues, and autism is one as well. David Wecht, his focus has been on ethics of lawyers, of judges. So they each have an area of their own interest and focus. And it's really important because they don't just sit behind, up on the bench, I'm going to say, and make decisions. So we've elected judges in odd numbered years. I've explained that you should be an attorney in most cases, but except for the magisterial district courts. I've explained this. So what I want to emphasize here is how you evaluate the candidates, but you don't have to do it on your own because fortunately you have the benefit of bar associations who have done a lot of legwork and homework for you. But you can do it on your own. So, but how do you do that? And as far as like even for retention elections, right? How do you do that? So you need to make sure that they have the requisite legal experience. So have they ever been disciplined? Even for judges, have they, as when they're being retained, has their judicial conduct been investigated? While an initial complaint, which is filed with the Judicial Conduct Board, is under seal, so that the Judicial Conduct Board can do their investigation in private, the Judicial Conduct Board makes a determination about whether a judge is, I guess, engaged in misconduct. If the Judicial Conduct Board feels that judge has engaged in that, then they will issue a public order, acknowledging it. They will then have a hearing on it. So I can tell you, for example, there is a candidate running for retention election in Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas who has um, been reprimanded, um, and there's actually a trial coming up, with respect to his behavior. And so he also has received a not recommended rating from the Philadelphia Bar Association's Judicial Commission. So, there are certain details that you definitely need to like look in, but you could probably look into it, but you can Google them. I also like to tell people that evaluating a candidate, you should look at their community involvement, right? Their involvement in in um, in causes that are important to showing that they have compassion and empathy. How's that? As well as their commitment to justice. So yes, once you become a judge, sometimes your involvement becomes more limited. Judges like to say that once they become a judge, they join the monastery, but because of limitations on who they can socialize with, but it's still important to make sure that these judges get out and are involved in their community. So I've mentioned a few times that there are evaluations done by bar associations, which is really important to help you understand, right? You can go online, you can go watch the appellate courts hearings, so are publicly available. PCN records them, and you can go onto PCN and watch them. You could also go onto the pacourts.us website, read decisions. It's a lot of work. I get it. Some of you may be interested. I think it's great. But I will tell you on Thursday, the Supreme Court issued 6 pretty important decisions. I still haven't gotten through them. So there are, you can go read it, but there's just a lot of work to do. But the bar associations across the Commonwealth do perform evaluations. So typically what happens, and varies depending on where you are, various bar associations, judicial commission processes are different. So the more thorough is the wrong word, but the more in-depth investigations, I will say, are done by the Allegheny County Bar Association, the Philadelphia Bar Association, the Montgomery County Bar Association, Lancaster County Bar Association, the more populated counties with the more lawyers, I'm going to say, and the Pennsylvania Bar Association. So the initial and I want to make sure I have time for questions, so I'll speak for a few more minutes, and then I want to answer questions. The Bar Association process initially begins with questionnaires. Questionnaires, actually, some counties make the questionnaires available on their Bar Association Judicial Commission's website, and it's a different name for everyone. So yes, you have to look through their website, but it is there. But the questionnaires are, ask about their educational legal experience, their significant legal cases, the Pennsylvania Bar Association questionnaire. I'm looking, I don't think I have it. For the retention judges, actually asked them for their list of cases that they determined that they felt were most significant in the opinions. It's interesting, judges can write opinions for the majority or for the dissent. When you listen to the recording of the fireside chat with Justice Wecht, he is known as the chief dissenter, and he prides himself with writing dissents that are carefully crafted, I'm going to say, because he feels that dissents can frequently become majorities. So, and the process, I don't know if I'm not going to assume anything, but the process that the judges write decisions, or the Supreme Court in particular, is that there is they have the hearing, or they have a discussion. They then decide who's sort of initially who's going to take which position. Is the whole court going to rule together? Is it going to diverge or separate? I'll say. And there is an initial draft of the majority opinion. It's circulated to the dissent. Then there is a draft of the dissent opinion, it's circulated back to the majority so that they each have seen the other's decision and they could maybe change it a little bit or address some concerns and maybe move the justice who's in the dissent to the majority. So it's a process, but both all the decisions are on the court's website, and I do commend you to read them. So after the questionnaire is completed, for example, and the candidate is actually interviewed through they're actually investigated first through an independent uh, investigating commission. Actually, let me take a step back. Philadelphia Bar Association's Judicial Commission has 38 members, not all lawyers. Diverse in attorney practice, in party representation, in in um, in even there are judges on this commission, retired judges, current judges, U.S. attorney, U.S. public defender, district attorney, defenders association, and it's a very wide range of participants, which is really important. The Pennsylvania Bar Association is not as large, but it's still diverse. The Allegheny County Bar Association is as large, and it is also similarly diverse in field of law and many different aspects. This commission has there's an investigative team that initially evaluates the judicial candidates' questionnaires. The team, again, is comprised of 5 people, lawyers and non-lawyers, actually interviews not only references from the candidate, but non-references. So when I chair many of the investigative teams and I find cases and I go interview the judge before whom that attorney has practiced, for example, I interview the opposing party. I try to even interview clients. We want to make sure that we get a broad range of references. As a investigative commission, we also interview the candidate. We then make a recommendation to the entire big commission, and then they make a recommendation. So you'll see that on the bar association's websites. But what do we evaluate, right? Similarly for retention elections, right? They need to have the expertise, they need to write well, they need to have good temperament, good character. You'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be in this day and age, how many people don't have the right temperament to become a judge, right? Patience and good listening skills are a top priority, I will say, for a judicial candidate, as well as an appellate court retention. The various bar associations have different kinds of recommendations for initial judicial candidates. The Philly Bar Association does highly recommended, not recommended. For the retention elections, it's recommended and not recommended. There's no highly. The other thing for retention elections, for example, the Pennsylvania Bar Association does all the appellate court judges and justices. The Philadelphia Bar Association only reviews appellate court candidates who have offices or are from Philadelphia County. The Allegheny County, these are mouthfuls. The Allegheny County Bar Association's Judicial Commission only reviews appellate court candidates and judicial retention candidates who are based in Allegheny. So sometimes you may see, not a review of across the board appellate court candidates. It doesn't mean that they haven't been recommended. It just means that they're not in their, I'm going to say, their jurisdiction or their purview. Okay, so I think the only other thing that I just briefly want to touch upon, and well, I'm going to even before this, when we have a retention election, we've talked about this. It's a yes or no vote. I want to make sure you understand what happens if there is a no vote. Okay, if a candidate is if we decide, the electorate decide that we are not retaining a judge or justice in that position will be open. That judge has their position until December 31, to the end of the year. We do not elect a judge in the next year. We elect a judge in odd numbered years, judge or justice. So we have a 2-year time period, right? Because the election would be in November 2027. They wouldn't take the seat until January 2028. So we would have a 2-year time period where that seat is vacant. Now, the governor can nominate somebody for that position, but his nomination has to be approved by the Senate. And as we all know, Harrisburg is getting nothing done right now. So we don't know if his nomination would be approved by the Senate. There also would, in all likelihood, be some political give and take, negotiating, whatever you want to call it. We had a situation most recently where a Supreme Court justice passed away unexpectedly. And so we had a court for a year that only had 6 Supreme Court justices. So it is possible, worst case scenario, that we would have 3 open positions on our Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Therefore, we would have 4 justices making the decisions for 2 years. Hopefully, that we won't see what happens. That happen. The other thing that you all need to know is that there are specific rules and laws governing what judges can and cannot say. I'm going to actually stop my sharing. And they're really important because, yes, there's a Supreme Court decision that talks about sort of, I'll say, a freedom of speech situation. So judges can say their personal beliefs. They cannot say how they would rule on a case, or even a case that is not before them, but that they think will come before them. So yes, we have talked here about matters that will come before the court. And yes, they will be faced with redistricting matters. They will be faced with mail-in ballot matters, because we just had actually on Thursday, one of the decisions addressed the mail-in ballots once again. We will have a court that will have to address, in all likelihood, gun rights, abortion rights, tax issues, so that they cannot answer questions about how they can rule. So there are limitations, right, on judges. They can't, judges are, I'll say in the past, retention elections, judicial candidates didn't even have to raise money. They didn't even have to have committees to help them raise money. But it's a whole new world out there, and now they have to do that. So many of our judges and justices are traveling across the Commonwealth, right? Raising money, getting out there and meeting people, which they never previously had to do with respect to retention elections. And so, it's just I'm going to say it's a new ball game, and the rules have changed, and they are not what they were intended in 1967. I know I've talked a lot, and I should look and see if there's any questions. I don't see any, but if anybody has any questions, I am happy to answer them.
Debbie, I actually do have a couple of questions. Because I feel like this is an odd year in the sense, well, it is an odd year, but in the sense that I feel like we're seeing an outsized focus on the retention elections, and there's this feeling out there that money is flowing in from outside the state to impact these elections.
Yep.
And I'm curious as to whether you're actually seeing that, and whether this is an oddity, or has this been building for several years now. And you said something in the Lunch and Learn that I watched over the weekend. Excuse me. And it was really interesting to hear about what justices or judges can and can't do in terms of campaigning, and there are ethical rules around
Right.
it. Can you just touch on those two real quick?
Sure. So first, it is unusual. It's not unusual that we're seeing so much outside money. Then the dollar amount has just increased drastically. When the three Supreme Court justices ran initially 10 years ago in 2015, there was a lot of money raised. Okay. And nothing in comparison to what's being raised right now. I mean, I think we're going to see, and our state, I don't want to poo-poo this, and I don't want to give us a jinx it. I think our state isn't going to see the same kind of money that was in Wisconsin, but I could be wrong, but I don't know. But and I hope not. But there is an unusual amount of money. I mean, the justices, if you watch the recording from the fireside chat, I mean, they can't believe that they have to go out and raise money. I mean, and they have to really raise money. And again, they can't the as you mentioned, the code they have a code of conduct. So they have a number of prohibited activities. Like they cannot ask for money. They actually can't ask you for money. That's their political campaign committee can ask for money. And it's interesting, there's even rules as to when the justice can start a political campaign, because a justice is not supposed to be a politician. So there's so many rules that are around this, but the campaigning, right? The campaign committee has to ask for money. Um, you know, but yet the justice does know who gives money to their campaign, because they have to file, campaign finance reports. So it's a very raising money, and being a judge and trying to be independent is, as I would tell you, really not a good situation here. Um, the ethical rules are that the biggest ones are that they cannot comment on on how they would rule, and they really shouldn't be telling you how, they can refer to old decisions and talk about old decisions that they've written. That's fine, but to start talking about how they would rule with a different set of facts in a different case, they cannot do that. And you had another question. I'm trying to remember what the other question.
Oh, I was actually, there's a question in the chat. Someone wanted to know about other states and comparable committees for nonpartisan information on judicial candidates for other states.
So Pennsylvania is one of 7 states that elect all of our judges.
Mm.
So it is very, again, we're sort of backwards and unique at the same time, I'd like to say. And so the judges have different ethical rules across the country. Federal court judges too have, ethical rules that they should be complying with. Um, but the committee, the process of even of the 7 states that we are one of 7 states that elect all of our judges. There's a lot of different ways. Some states do elect judges after, or have a retention election after the justice, the Supreme Court justice, is actually appointed or nominated or selected by a merit, but then they have a retention election. So uh, there's a wide variety. I really do hold out our bar association's judicial commissions again as a beacon. They have really done a very thorough investigation of judges and justices, and it has gotten better over the years.
Do we think that we're going to see a different form of uh, uh, appointing or a merit selection of judges and justices at any point in the near future?
At any point in the near future, the answer is no. But the
Okay.
reason is because a change is a constitutional amendment, which is a whole more complicated process. So I do hope that we get some legislators interested in this. Um, but the constitutional amendment, remember, has to be passed by two different legislative sessions and then is on the ballot for the electorate to decide. So that's it in itself a lengthy process. The only other thing that's important here that I want you all to know is that um, the judges and justices and their political campaign committees have to abide by the code of conduct. Outside monies, third party PACs, don't have to abide by rules of conduct, the judicial code of conduct. So it is very interesting because there are a number of misleading ads out there right now. And so the Pennsylvania Bar Association actually has had the candidates who are up for retention election sign it's not an oath, but sign under oath an agreement that says, that they will abide by the rules of judicial conduct. However, if somebody issues an ad that is misleading, inaccurate, unethical, they are allowed to respond, because I don't know if you recall this, but and if it comes from their own political committee, they have to retract it. So this new addition in the Pennsylvania Bar Association's requirement came about as a result of some ads 2 years ago that were misleading by a candidate, and so that candidate actually did retract the ad. So there is that, I'll say, a safeguard by candidates or by retention elections, justices and judges, but not, a third party doesn't have the same ethical rules.
Right. Yeah, and the misinformation and the disinformation out there at this point is pretty stark
Frightening,
and pretty
frightening,
terrible. Yeah.
frightening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see any other
I think
questions
Natalie
in
has a
the
hands up,
Oh, okay.
but you're muted, Natalie.
Wait. Tiffany, can
Oh,
we
I'm sorry. I'm creating a havoc.
No, you're not. You're good. I don't Tiff, can we unmute Natalie or
I can't unmute her. I can ask to unmute. Oh,
there?
wait, Natalie,
Do that
you
again,
just muted
Natalie.
yourself.
One more time. Mm,
Sorry.
Natalie, just do it again.
put it
There.
There we go.
There she
Yay.
goes.
Very quickly, I just wonder, and particularly with this conversation right now about Debbie, if you could comment about the postcards that just went out by a GOP PAC in terms of how the Democrat had, twisted this gerrymandering here, and it
Yeah,
is
I mean, it's
entirely
wrong.
false.
It's totally false. It's wrong. But the postcard's
huge.
out. It's just remarkable.
It's headlines this morning on the Enquirer.
Right. And this weekend it was, and Justice Wecht even
And
gave an
yeah.
interview about it. So but just getting, when people get a postcard, but if they don't get the Inquirer, they don't look up on the internet, they're not gonna, or read the decision, right? They're not gonna know that this information is false. And I mean, yeah, you could try to bring an injunction to stop it, but you're not gonna pull back postcards that have already been mailed.
That's why
Yeah.
it's so important that everybody, that we stress how important it is to vote and contribute.
And I will tell you, yeah, and make sure, how do I say this without any partisanship? It's really we need to bring in all voters, right? And inform them, right? We need to get more voters. We need to have more registered voters. We need to, I mean, there's so much here. Pennsylvanians sit back and say, "Oh, I can't, my vote doesn't count." I will tell you, there is a Superior Court judge who, her initial election, the decision was made by under 50 ballots. Okay, so every ballot counts, and you have to tell people that. I mean, these could be heavily contested elections. Votes could be challenged, right? And the irony here, right, is a vote could be challenged, initially probably brought into the Commonwealth Court, but ends up before the Supreme Court justices. So it's just really important to have, that there actually not be an issue, right? And that it be a clear cut answer.
Mhm. Mhm.
Debbie, I could spend all day talking about this stuff. I really could. I was thinking back to what you said about Justice Donohue. I could have used her when I was a junior associate, man,
Right.
learning to practice before the courts. Um, Thank you so much. I can highly recommend to the group here that they go to the website, listen to the resources there. I spent some time this weekend learning some things. So I would highly recommend going to Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts and looking at those resources there.
Meg, Meg,
Yes,
Bill,
yes.
Bill Ewing has a question on the chat, which was, I thought, a really good question. Can you get to the chat and look at that?
Right. I'll look for
Just
it.
lost it.
I just hold on. Bill.
There.
Looking.
There's a PAC out there that calls
That's the
itself
question.
Defend Our Courts and has raised more than $1 million online, claiming it will be used for the retention justices. But I can't find what the work they've actually done. Is there anything that can be done about this? I don't, there's a lot of different organizations out there. So the only thing I would say is they have to register. But I don't know what else you can do. About it other than maybe challenge a PAC. Maybe that's the ACLU's
Yeah.
jurisdiction. But I did want to mention that did remind me of there and it went in and out. Oh
That
my
happens to
God.
me all the time, right?
Oh, it's so frightening. But I guess the only other thing I would say is that there are, there are ads now for all parties. Is fundraising from all parties. To me, what's most important, right, is just educating and informing and making sure that, I have so many friends who call me and say, Deb, I don't know who to vote for. I don't know how to vote. They're like at the, it's November 4th and they're voting. So just make sure talk to your friends, tell them to go to the bar association's websites, tell them to call lawyer friends. Like, it is important that word of mouth be used as well, because you are a trusted resource.
Thank you. Tiffany, would you mind putting the slides back up for me? Because it is now my distinct pleasure, I'm very excited about this, to introduce everyone to Gwen Stoltz, our incoming, well, she's current now, executive director. Yay, right? Our new executive director. Anyone who's been around Represent for a while may recognize Gwen. She ran as and we were very excited to endorse her. She ran as a Represent endorsed candidate for state rep in House District 143. She did not win, unfortunately. We were most sad about that. So she's been spending her time most recently working as a science writer and public servant for EPA and PADEP. But we stole her away, and we're very excited to introduce her today. Between her public service, her running as a candidate, she brings a tremendous amount of experience to the role of executive director. And I am not going to natter on anymore. I'm going to let her hop on and say hi.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am so happy to be here. So hold on a second. Okay, so for those of you that don't already know me, I did want to share just a little bit more on my background and my connection to represent PA. So as Meg mentioned, back in 2022, I ran for the State House in my home district, the 143rd district. And Represent PA was one of my first bigger early supporters. So I know firsthand what it takes to run for office and also the impact that Represent PA can have on a campaign. Now, leading up to that race in 2022, I had been an elected Democratic committee person for about 7 years. I also had a countywide role with the Bucks County Democrats on their bylaws committee. I was the secretary for my municipal organization, the Plumstead Democrats, and also having come from a larger, pretty politically engaged family, it was no surprise to anyone in my family or in the area when I decided to step up and run for office. But professionally, I am actually a research biochemist. And I started my career in the pharmaceutical industry at the beginning of the drug discovery process. I then found my way to medical and science writing when my kids were younger. I have 3 kids. And that was helpful. I was able to use my science brain, as I like to say, and also stay home with my kids. Just due to the nature of the contracts that I was working at the time, that work ended up having an environmental slant, which is how I then ended up working for the EPA. And then most recently was working for the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. In that most recent role with DEP, I was managing about 250 municipalities in the southeastern region, working with local municipal and county governments to ensure basically that they were doing what they were supposed to be doing to keep pollution out of stormwater. If there's anyone on here in the stormwater space, I was working on the MS4 program. For most people, that probably doesn't mean much. But in a nutshell, I am a mashup of science and politics. But I want to go back to my race in 2022 just a little bit more. And I won't take too much of your time. I can see it's already 9:31. But I wanted to talk about it to highlight the importance of Represent PA. So I live in Bucks County, Purple County, Swing County, and the 143rd district has a very interesting political landscape. We actually have more registered Republicans than Democrats. But we also have a large block of registered independent voters. And historically, at least back in 2022, those independent voters were swinging left. So, the thought was, okay, if we get all of these Democrats and all of the left-leaning independents, we can overtake the Republicans. So to me, the strategy seemed clear. All right, we've got to get out at the doors. We have to have a ton of persuasion conversations. And that's what we did. I think at the end of the campaign, I had knocked on something like over 12,000 doors. I think it was more than that. I have slight PTSD from it. But that was just me. I also had a campaign manager knocking doors. We had a field director, a field organizer, wonderful volunteers, some paid canvassers. And when all was said and done, I think it was over 100,000 touches at the doors. Because of that, in a district that on paper was about 36% Democrat, we managed to earn about 47% of the vote. Okay, we didn't make it to 50%. However, that year, 2022, that is the year that the Democrats took back the state house for the first time in over a decade. We elected Governor Josh Shapiro, and I know that our robust campaign in the 143rd definitely played a part in that. We turned the 143rd into race where my opponent had to throw money into it. And her party probably was thinking they didn't need to spend much in there. That money had to come from somewhere, which means it came away from somewhere else. All of those touches at the doors definitely turned out the vote. So even though in the 143rd, in my smaller district, it didn't get us over the finish line, it definitely helped up ticket races. And the only way that we were able to build such a robust campaign was because of early supporters like Represent PA. So knowing firsthand what it is like to run for office, and while it's an honor to run for office, it is a lot of hard work and it's difficult. So knowing those difficulties, knowing the impact that Represent PA can have on a campaign, because it quite literally can change the trajectory of a race, and then also knowing what we're up against in Pennsylvania, which is, quite frankly, we have a 1-vote majority in the state house and a Democratic governor defending our basic human rights, right? I mean, that's what we're up against right now. Because of all of those things, I am incredibly fired up and passionate, excited, ready to roll up my sleeves and help other Democratic pro-choice women running for the State House and the State Senate. I am just beyond delighted to be here to do this work. I would love to meet many of you in person. Some of you I've already met in person. We have an event coming up in Pittsburgh on October 23rd. I think we might have a slide, or we don't have a slide, with the QR code if you're interested in attending that. We also have an event where we can meet in person in Philadelphia coming up on November 13th. There will definitely be more information coming about that one. Another virtual opportunity is next month. I'm personally very excited about next month's breakfast briefing. We are going to have international best-selling author Jo Piazza, who's going to talk about a book that she wrote. It's about a fictional female character that decides to run for office in Pennsylvania. Crazy idea, right? And she's going to talk about her research that she did writing that book. And then we're also going to be joined by two other previously endorsed state rep candidates, Elizabeth Morrow and Hadley Haas. And they're going to talk about their accounts of barriers they faced as a woman, ways that they dealt with that, with those challenges. So I'm really interested to hear this conversation. In the meantime, I would love to hear from you, and I can put my email in the chat if you are interested in hosting an event, or if you are interested in talking to me about something you think we should be talking about, or maybe just feel like chatting. I am here for all of that. 2026, we have got to come out strong. We've got the gubernatorial race at the top of the ballot, and I really strongly believe that when you have compelling candidates at the state rep and the state Senate level, that is definitely going to turn out the vote. We have to hold on to our majority in the House. We have to grow that majority, and we must make gains in the Senate so that we are not constantly on defense. We want to actually move stuff for the Senate and the House. So that's my shtick. That's my spiel. Really happy to be here and would love to talk to everyone in person or offline at some point. And I think with that, since we're 6 minutes over, I will kick it back to Meg.
It's time for my spiel, right? It is time. It is that time of day. So, you know, it is 2025. We have judicial elections, we have municipal elections, but this is not an off year for Represent. We are still doing the work of evaluating candidates. We are still doing the work of raising money. We are still doing the work of getting ready so that when our women candidates are incumbents and our challengers hit the ground, they have the funding they need. I don't have to go through this slide because everybody here pretty much knows that, as a lot of us have said today, Harrisburg is at a standstill, right? So, you know, nothing's getting done because we have a slim majority in the House and the Senate is controlled by the Republicans. So literally at a standstill. The budget also, well, we're not going to go there. So in any event, our work right now is raising that money in order to have that money ready for our investment cycles, and we kick that off at the end of this year with our incumbent protection program, and then we roll into the programs for the challenger women next year. Now, many of you on this call know, because you're on the endorsement committee, how much fun it is to make those decisions about funding and endorsement and help those candidates. So this is now my pitch. Tiffany, can you pull up that fantastic slide that you just made for me? There we go. So we are having I'm going to call it a kickoff meeting coming up next month of the members of the endorsement committee. To talk about timelines, to talk about what we'll be doing, to talk about some possible changes to our tweaks to our endorsement process for funding so we can get money to these women early. How do you become a member of the endorsement committee? If you donate to us, at the level of endorsement committee, which is $1,200 annually, or you can do that on a month-to-month, $100 month-to-month basis. You get to be part of the endorsement committee, and you get to evaluate candidate applications, and you get to sit in these meetings where we talk about the elections, the landscape, and the candidates. And it is a lot of fun, hosted by yours truly. So that is my spiel for getting the money in to give these fantastic candidates the money that they need to run. And as you heard Gwen say, we were instrumental in her campaign, and we want to be instrumental in these amazing women's campaigns. I think we had a couple of people put in. Oh, that's right, Peggy. Thank you. We did change the time to earlier in the day so that people can go to the No Kings rally and participate in our kickoff endorsement committee. Thank you, Alan, for putting that up there. That is what I was just talking about in terms of joining the endorsement committee. And I think here's our last slide up here. Other ways that you can be involved and represent. Attend these breakfast briefings, host an event, join our mailing list if you're not already there, and please follow us and promote us on social media. That'd be great. Thank you, everyone. I'm looking forward to the October meeting. This is going to be really fantastic. I've already started reading the book. So look out for that invitation, and look out for the invitation to join the endorsement committee. And thanks for sticking with us. I know we're over time today, but it was great that all of you stuck around. So thanks. Have a great rest of your Monday and your week.